Marilyn Monroe stands in a costume fitting room on a Hollywood film set. Through the thin curtain, she hears the costume designer talking to her assistant. The designer says, "Don't bother explaining the historical details to Marilyn. She won't understand anyway." Marilyn stays silent behind the curtain, doesn't come out, doesn't confront them, just listens. When she finally emerges, what she says about the costume's historical accuracy leaves the designer speechless. Before we continue with this story, please take just 10 seconds to subscribe and hit that like button. It helps us bring you more stories like this one. Now, let's discover together what really happened in that costume room. 20th Century Fox Studios. Soundstage 7, a Tuesday morning in early spring. The massive building sits on the studio lot like a concrete fortress. No windows, just walls and a loading dock and the constant hum of air conditioning fighting against California heat. Inside, the space is divided into temporary rooms, plywood walls creating offices, dressing areas, storage. The costume department occupies the southeast corner, racks of period clothing, shelves of accessories, mirrors and sewing machines, and bolts of fabric stacked against walls. The film is a period drama, set in 1870s London, high society, drawing rooms and ballrooms. Elaborate costumes required, historically accurate. The studio hired Martha Greenhouse as head costume designer. She's 52, been in the business 30 years, worked on 40 films, won 2 Academy Awards for costume design. She's respected, known for her attention to detail, for her research, for creating costumes that don't just look period, but feel period, that help actors inhabit their characters. Martha has strong opinions about actors, divides them into 2 categories: those who care about craft, who ask questions, who want to understand their characters deeply, and those who just want to look good, who treat costumes as decoration, who don't care about historical accuracy or character development, just want flattering clothes that photograph well. In Martha's experience, most movie stars fall into the second category, especially actresses, especially beautiful actresses who got cast for their looks rather than their talent. Marilyn Monroe is scheduled for a fitting this morning. The female lead, a British aristocrat. Multiple costume changes. Elaborate gowns. Martha has spent weeks designing these costumes, researching 1870s fashion, studying paintings and photographs, getting fabrics custom dyed to match period colors, creating undergarments that would have been worn beneath the gowns. This is serious work. Historical work. Work that matters to Martha. She doesn't expect Marilyn to care about any of it. Expects her to show up late, complain about the corset, want things adjusted to show more cleavage, want costumes that flatter rather than costumes that serve the character. Martha has worked with movie stars before, knows the pattern. They smile, they nod, they pretend to listen. Then they ask for changes that undermine everything, that make the costumes historically inaccurate, but more glamorous, more Hollywood. Martha's assistant is a young woman named Caroline, 24, recent graduate of design school. This is her first major film. She's eager, enthusiastic, hangs on Martha's every word, takes notes constantly, wants to learn everything. Martha likes her, sees potential, but Caroline is naive, still believes movie stars care about craft, still thinks everyone in Hollywood respects artistry. Martha knows better. 30 years taught her that Hollywood respects money and beauty. Everything else is negotiable. At 9:30, there's a knock on the costume department door. Caroline opens it. Marilyn Monroe stands in the hallway. She's wearing simple clothes, slacks, a button-down shirt, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She's on time. This surprises Martha. Most stars show up late, make everyone wait, establish dominance through delay. Marilyn apologizes for any inconvenience, says she knows fittings take time, wants to make the process as smooth as possible. Her voice is quiet, polite, almost apologetic. Martha nods, professional, shows Marilyn to the fitting area, a section of the room separated by curtains, privacy, mirrors, a platform to stand on. The first costume hangs on a dress form, an elaborate day dress, green silk, black trim, high collar, long sleeves, multiple layers of petticoats beneath. Historically accurate to 1875, Martha explains, they'll start with this one, work through the costumes chronologically as they appear in the film. Marilyn nods, thanks her, steps behind the curtain to change. Martha and Caroline wait outside. They can hear Marilyn moving. The rustle of fabric, the sound of buttons. Martha glances at her watch, thinks about the 12 other fittings scheduled today, thinks about the production meeting this afternoon. The constant pressure of keeping a film on schedule, on budget. The stress of dealing with stars who don't appreciate the work that goes into their costumes. Caroline is excited. This is Marilyn Monroe, the biggest movie star in the world. She whispers this to Martha. Martha shrugs. Seen it all before. One star is like another. They all want the same things. Want to look beautiful. Want to be adored. Don't care about the craft. Don't care about the history. Don't care about anything except how they appear on screen. Caroline asks if they should explain the historical context of the costumes to Marilyn. Explain the research. Martha did. The paintings she studied. The authentic construction techniques. Maybe Marilyn would be interested. Maybe she'd appreciate the work. Martha looks at Caroline, sees the naivety, the hope, the belief that everyone cares about what she cares about. Martha knows this will fade. Give Caroline a few years in Hollywood. She'll learn, she'll understand that movie stars don't want education, don't want complexity, want simple, want flattering, want easy. Martha speaks. Her voice is low but not quite low enough. The curtain is thin. Sound carries. She tells Caroline not to bother explaining the historical details to Marilyn. Says Marilyn won't understand anyway. Says movie stars like her aren't interested in history or accuracy. Just want to look pretty. No point wasting breath on explanations that will be ignored. Better to keep it simple. Show her the costume. Make sure it fits. Move on to the next one. Behind the curtain, Marilyn freezes. She's halfway into the dress. One arm through a sleeve. The other arm suspended in air. She heard every word, every syllable, every assumption, every dismissal. Her breath catches, not from surprise, from the familiar ache of being reduced, of being decided, of having someone determine her value without knowing anything real about her. She could pull the curtain aside, could step out, could confront Martha, could demand respect, could explain that she's actually very interested in historical accuracy, that she's been reading about Victorian England for weeks, that she researched the period specifically for this role, that she cares deeply about getting the character right, about understanding the world her character lived in, about making choices that serve the story rather than her vanity. But she doesn't do any of that, just stands there behind the curtain, holding the dress, processing the words, adding them to the collection, the endless collection of moments when people decided she was empty, decided she was decoration, decided she was beautiful and nothing else. The moments that accumulate like small stones, each one light, together crushing. She finishes putting on the dress, buttons it carefully, adjusts the collar, smooths the skirt, takes a breath. Another, prepares herself. Not for the fitting, for the performance of being Marilyn Monroe, of being what people expect, of not making waves, of being professional even when people are unprofessional to her, of maintaining grace, even when receiving none. She pulls the curtain aside, steps out onto the platform. The dress fits well. Martha did excellent work. The proportions are perfect. The color flatters. The construction is flawless. Marilyn stands there, waiting. Martha and Caroline look at her, assessing, checking the fit, looking for problems. Adjustments needed. Martha asks Marilyn to turn slowly, full circle, let her see how the dress moves, how it hangs. Marilyn complies, turns slowly. The dress moves beautifully. The skirt has proper weight. The bodice fits without pulling. Martha nods, satisfied, tells Caroline to make a note. This one is ready. No alterations needed. Then Marilyn speaks. Her voice is still quiet, but something has changed. An edge underneath. Not anger. Something else. Determination maybe. Or sadness. Or the particular strength that comes from being underestimated constantly and choosing to prove people wrong anyway. She tells Martha the dress is beautiful. Tells her the construction is remarkable. Then she says something about the neckline. About how it reflects the 1875 transition from the bustle silhouette, about how day dresses in this period were beginning to show more of the natural waistline, about how this particular shade of green would have been achieved with synthetic dyes that became available in the 1860s, about how the black trim is perfect, Because mourning customs were so influential on mainstream fashion throughout the Victorian period, Martha's face changes. Goes from professional neutrality to shock, her mouth opens slightly. She stares at Marilyn, really stares, trying to reconcile what she's hearing with what she assumed, trying to understand how Marilyn Monroe knows these things. These specific, detailed, correct things about 1870s fashion history. Caroline looks between them, confused, uncertain what just happened, just knows the energy shifted. Something changed in the room, something important. Marilyn continues, talks about the petticoats, about how Martha constructed them authentically, about how most period films cheat, use modern techniques, modern materials, but these feel right, feel like what would have actually been worn. Talks about how important that is for character, for understanding how women moved in this period, how the weight of clothing affected posture, affected behavior, affected identity. She's not showing off, not performing knowledge to prove a point, just talking, sharing genuine interest, genuine appreciation for Martha's work, for the research, for the craft, speaking as one artist to another, as someone who understands what it means to care about details most people never notice. Martha still hasn't moved, still staring, her assumptions crumbling, her categories dissolving. Marilyn Monroe doesn't fit, doesn't match the box Martha put her in. Movie stars don't know this stuff, don't care about this stuff, don't spend time researching Victorian fashion history for a role, don't appreciate authentic construction techniques, don't understand the difference between accurate and Hollywood. But Marilyn clearly does, not just surface knowledge, deep knowledge, the kind that comes from reading, from studying, from caring, from taking the work seriously, from being a professional who prepares, who researches, who brings intelligence to roles even when nobody expects it, even when nobody values it, even when people assume she's incapable of it. Caroline breaks the silence, asks Marilyn where she learned all this. Marilyn explains she's been reading about the period, found books about Victorian fashion, about daily life, about social customs, about how class and gender and history intersected in 1870s England, wanted to understand her character's world, wanted to make choices grounded in reality rather than modern assumptions. The costume is part of that, not just clothing, a window into how her character would have experienced her body, her space, her possibilities. Martha finally finds her voice, apologizes, says she made an assumption, says she was wrong to make it, says she's impressed, actually impressed, not patronizing, not fake, genuine respect, genuine recognition that she misjudged, that her categories were too simple, that Marilyn Monroe is more than she allowed her to be. Marilyn nods, accepts the apology, doesn't make Martha grovel, doesn't lecture, just moves forward, asks about the next costume, asks about the historical context. Martha starts explaining, talking about 1876 now, about how fashion changed year to year, about what her character would have worn to an evening event, about fabrics and construction and meaning. And Marilyn engages, asks questions, smart questions, questions that show she's following, that show she understands, that show she's thinking about character, about storytelling, about how costumes communicate information to audiences, about how authenticity serves narrative, even when audiences don't consciously notice. The fitting takes 3 hours. They go through 12 costumes, each one discussed, each one considered. Martha finds herself actually explaining her research, showing Marilyn the reference materials, the paintings she studied, the photographs, the historical texts, not because she has to, because Marilyn's interest is genuine, because this is the conversation Martha wants to have, the conversation she rarely gets to have, about craft, about history, about taking the work seriously. Caroline watches this transformation, watches Martha become animated, enthusiastic, watches her share knowledge she usually keeps to herself because most people don't care, watches Marilyn absorb it all, take notes, ask follow-up questions, treat the fitting like a research session, like an opportunity to learn, to deepen her understanding of the character, of the world, of the story they're trying to tell. When the fitting ends, Martha does something she never does, thanks Marilyn, not for her time, for her interest, for caring about the costumes, for understanding that they matter, that historical accuracy matters, that details matter, that the work Martha spent weeks doing isn't just decoration, isn't just pretty clothes, is part of storytelling. part of creating a believable world, part of helping actors inhabit characters fully. Marilyn thanks Martha back, says the costumes are beautiful, says Martha's research is evident, says she's grateful to work with someone who takes it this seriously, says it helps her, gives her confidence. Knowing the costumes are right, knowing she can trust them. Knowing Martha cares about getting it right. After Marilyn leaves, Martha sits down. Quiet, processing. Caroline asks if she's okay. Martha nods, says she's fine. Just thinking about assumptions, about how wrong they can be. About how she decided Marilyn Monroe was empty before meeting her, before giving her a chance. Based on what? Based on beauty, based on fame, based on nothing real, based on prejudice. Caroline asks what changed. Martha says everything changed, says she heard herself through Marilyn's ears, heard her own dismissal, heard how it must have sounded behind that curtain, heard the cruelty in deciding someone is stupid because they're beautiful, in deciding someone doesn't care because they're famous, in deciding someone can't understand because they don't match your expectations. She says Marilyn could have confronted her, could have embarrassed her, could have demanded an apology in front of Caroline, could have made a scene, made sure Martha understood she'd been insulting. Instead, Marilyn just stepped out and demonstrated knowledge, demonstrated interest, demonstrated exactly what Martha said she was incapable of, did it with grace, with dignity, without making Martha feel small, just proved her wrong, gently, firmly, undeniably. Caroline asks if Martha will tell anyone. Martha says no, says this is between them, says she doesn't need to broadcast her own prejudice, her own failure, just needs to learn from it. Needs to stop putting people in boxes, stop deciding their capabilities based on their appearance, stop assuming beautiful means empty, stop assuming famous means shallow, stop assuming she knows who someone is without ever asking. The film shoots over the next 6 weeks. Martha watches Marilyn work, watches her prepare, watches her ask questions, watches her make choices, smart choices, thoughtful choices, choices grounded in character and history and storytelling, watches her take direction, offer ideas, collaborate, watches her be professional, kind to crew, patient with mistakes, hard on herself, dedicated to getting it right. Martha realizes Marilyn does this on every film, brings this level of preparation, this level of care, but nobody sees it. Nobody credits her with it. They see the image, the beauty, the persona. They don't see the work behind it, the intelligence, the dedication, the craft, because they decided, before she walks in the room, they decided she's decoration. They decided she's empty, so they don't look for evidence otherwise. Don't recognize it when it's right in front of them. Martha tells this story years later, after Marilyn is gone, after the world decides her tragedy, her weakness, her inability to handle fame. Martha tells a different story, about a fitting room, about a thin curtain, about words that carried, about a woman who heard herself dismissed and responded with knowledge, with grace, with dignity, about being wrong, about learning, about how intelligence exists in places we don't expect when we're too busy assuming to actually look. She says Marilyn Monroe taught her something. That day, taught her to question assumptions, to give people chances, to recognize that beauty and intelligence aren't opposites, that fame and depth can coexist, that the categories we create are too simple for the complexity of real human beings, that everyone deserves to be seen, really seen, not just looked at. Seen. Caroline became a costume designer herself, works on her own films now. She tells her assistants the story about Marilyn Monroe, about Martha Greenhouse, about the moment everything shifted, about how you never know who's listening behind curtains, about how assumptions kill possibilities, about how grace under disrespect is a form of power, about how proving people wrong quietly is sometimes more effective than shouting. The dress from that fitting still exists, in a studio archive, green silk faded slightly, with time, black trim intact, properly constructed, historically accurate. Someone cataloging it notices the detail, the authentic techniques, the research evident in every stitch. They note the designer, Martha Greenhouse. They note the actress who wore it, Marilyn Monroe. They don't note what happened during the fitting, don't know about the curtain. The words, the demonstration. The lesson, that story lives only in memory, in the people who were there, who learned something, who changed. Think about the assumptions you make about people, about who has intelligence, who has depth, who cares about craft. Think about how quickly you decide, how completely you judge, based on what? Appearance. Fame, your own categories. Marilyn Monroe stood behind a curtain and heard herself dismissed, could have made it a confrontation, could have demanded respect. Instead, she stepped out and demonstrated knowledge, proved wrong. The person who decided she was incapable did it with grace, with dignity, without cruelty. That's power, that's strength. Subscribe for more stories about the moments that reveal what we assume versus what's actually true, and ask yourself, who did you decide was empty today, without ever asking what they know.